This is the best of the week on Relevant Radio.
Our spiritual director today is Father Rob Kroll, and we're talking about hope in the Jubilee year, talking about despair being a willful choice. So it's not just a feeling of depression or sadness, but it's actually making a choice for that. Can you go into that a little bit more, just so we're understanding what do we want to avoid in making a choice for despair?
Sure. And maybe what I want to just throw in here too, Patrick, is that when Aquinas talks about despair, he talks about it as one extreme when it comes to hope. And he says that with any virtue, the mean is always found between two extremes. There's a defect by excess and a defect by deficiency. So what despair is, it's a defect by deficiency. In other words, I don't have sufficient hope. I go even to the extreme of basically renouncing hope and renouncing the possibility of salvation through Christ. The other side of that extreme, or the other extreme, I should say, is what Aquinas calls presumption, meaning I don't really need forgiveness or salvation. I've basically got it made, and basically, no matter how much I sin, I'm going to be okay. And I think there are a lot of people, even Catholics, that live with that belief, kind of like, as long as I'm not a mass murderer, I'm going to get to heaven, right? So there can be either extreme. But to go back to the despair, we all struggle at times with a depressed mood, and then there are people who are actually diagnosed with depression and maybe struggle to maintain a joyful outlook on life. But the despair that Aquinas is talking about and that we really want to emphasize is more, like we said, more engaging the will and saying, I know that Jesus Christ came to save us. I know that He's offered me this gift of eternal life, but I have somehow concluded that my sins are too numerous or too great, too serious, and that there's really no possibility for me of being saved. And as we're talking now, I'm thinking of this movie called The Mission that maybe a lot of us have seen with Robert De Niro. And De Niro in the movie, he's a military guy who kills his brother. And so in a moment of rage, he stabs and kills his brother. And then we see him languishing in a prison. And then Jeremy Irons comes by as this Jesuit priest and offers him the possibility of salvation. But De Niro basically says, there is no hope for me, and he just feels he's going to languish in this prison and die and go to hell. Well, fortunately, he accepts the Jesuits' offer. And there is this whole journey where they're going up to this very high falls in South America, and you see De Niro literally dragging behind himself his armor, and it symbolizes his past life as a violent military man. And anyway, he has to climb up these cliffs, and it's very, very difficult for him. But again, that's what hope is. Hope is that I can actually obtain or achieve this beautiful goal of life with God. But it's going to be difficult. It's going to require my effort, but it's especially going to require God's grace. And so it's always that tandem, working in tandem, grace and free will. So we should never despair, because God's grace, God's mercy God is mercy. And if there's nothing that, Sister Faustina, and I mentioned there was a Jubilee of Mercy. If there's anything that Christianity offers, it's that God is love and mercy itself. So we really have no right ever to despair. We have so many saints who give us examples of deep conversions after a life of really serious sin. So let's draw strength again from our companions who are the saints as we seek to keep hope alive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Father, I think one of the places that people oftentimes do get stuck is right in that place where they feel like either I've done something that is just unforgivable, or I've led this life that is so far from God. Why can God actually meet me in my sin, or has He just turned His angry face away from me and has never? So, I guess what I'd like to ask of you is, isn't hope something that we need precisely within those times of sin, times when we've turned away from the Lord? And what words can you say to encourage someone who's maybe struggling with exactly that?
Sure. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Patrick. We need hope when we're really discouraged by our sinfulness. I think about those in Dante's vision of hell. There's a sign, as people approach hell that says, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here."
Yeah, good one.
And yet Jesus tells us, with God all things are possible. And so I think the antidote to Dante's, message of abandon hope is, to say that even if I've struggled for years with a particular sin, as long as I get up for the fight and I keep letting the Lord dust me off and purify me and move me forward, and that's where the sacrament of reconciliation, confession is huge. That talk about a source of hope and a restorer of hope. I mean, going back to confession and knowing that I am truly absolved of my sins. Now, along with that comes, as best I can, the obligation to avoid sin in the future. So we don't want to be presumptuous again, but we do want to maintain the hope that God is patient, He is gentle. As long as I keep returning and laying down my sins at the cross, He's going to forgive me. That sacrament of confession is huge. And then the Eucharist, too, is a great source of hope for us, because the Eucharist is the representation, the reactualization in our midst of that saving sacrifice of Jesus Christ. And so I always want to receive it worthily. I want to be not in a state of mortal sin, but it doesn't mean I have to be completely sinless either. The Eucharist has a power. It is itself a source of great hope for us, and we're encouraged to go even daily to receive that hope. So, I think in our Catholic faith, we have the resources. We have the sacraments. We have all the wonderful devotions like the Rosary. I mean, there's so many ways that our hope can be nourished, and it's really up to us to choose to avail ourselves of these helps. I mean, that's the thing. God gives us freedom, and as tragic as it is, we can freely turn our back on Him and say, "No, I'm going to not welcome your offer of grace," and then, despair is really a possibility.
The example of Judas Iscariot, who just couldn't see beyond his own, which, I mean, even in the sins that we encounter in our own lives every day, which some are, very serious, perhaps rival the seriousness of betraying the Lord, but and then some of them not so serious. We can get caught up in that same idea, and that's when we need that hope. Hi, this is Patrick Conley. You can join me and listen on the Relevant Radio app to The Inner Life, live each weekday at 11 a.m. Central. And thanks for listening.